Move to have a look at what's grabbing headlines in the press now. Solange Mougin is joining us, and she's starting off with the upcoming one-year anniversary of the war in Ukraine.
To begin the roll-up to this February 24th anniversary, we can take a look at Libération. It has created today Le Libé des Ukrainiens, the Libération of Ukrainians, a special edition of testimonies dedicated to what it calls the 1001 Faces of Ukraine. Now, Mediapart as well is focusing on the one-year anniversary. It's saying how daily life, Ukrainians, their daily life, they've had to be confronted with so much death that they have had to recenter themselves on love, family, and friendship. Meanwhile, on the ground in Ukraine, the Kiev Independent tells us that prosecutors are actually building cases if ever in the future there would be an international tribunal. They're building cases to show how Russia is using sexual violence as a weapon of war. And finally, on the political front, Reuters tells us that the Ukrainian president said that negotiations with Russia are a useless waste of time. This was in response to Emmanuel Macron saying on Sunday that Russia should be, quote, defeated but not crushed, end quote, and that the war should be settled with negotiations.
Let's move to Nigeria for this next story. The country is preparing for presidential and parliamentary elections happening on Saturday, Solange.
Yeah, what voter turnout will be like, that is the focus today of the Nigerian paper, The Daily Trust. It explains that while voter registration has increased in the past 2 decades, turnout is actually gradually now declining with the security situation and a decreased trust in political leaders to blame. Now, The Conversation, the academic site, it agrees with this. It says that logistics, security challenges, and political malpractice have made voters wary. It explains that with 93 million voters, this is the biggest election on the African continent this year. It's also a costly one. The site says that Nigeria actually spends some 2% of its GDP on elections. Now, finances are actually part of the conversation when it comes to this election. AP tells us that Nigeria This economy is in crisis, that there are not enough new banknotes or the naira after the government introduced a new currency, a new banknotes. Now, as the Nigerian Sun tells us, this financial crisis with the banknotes has created widespread anger, and it could affect Saturday's results. But the issue is even bigger than the currency one. Le Monde has an excellent slew of articles about Nigeria's economy, and it explains that favoritism, institutionalized banditism, and bad policies like the naira currency problem, they have made the nation a place of economic chaos, and therefore desperation and poverty are on the rise.
Let's come closer to home, well, for us here anyway, to France. A citizens' council has come out in favour of reforming end-of-life care.
Yeah, and they've come out overwhelmingly in favor of changing the laws to make assisted suicide or euthanasia legal in France. The Citizens' Council, as Le Parisien tells us, voted after months of working on this issue. They began working in December on it. L'Obs tells us that they voted, 75% of them voted in favor of opening up the laws in regard to end-of-life care. 72% were in favor of assisted suicides, and 66 were in favor of legislation allowing euthanasia, or where healthcare professionals have a more active role. For the Catholic paper La Croix, this tendency is not a surprise, but what is going to be interesting, this article says, is the battle over the details of the new guidelines, which could, if they go through, be a big part of Macron's legacy. But for now, the president postponed Wednesday's dinner where the main representatives were meant to hash out these possible guidelines.
Solange is going to end on some very important science news for us. She's found a story. Well, it's about a bodily mystery that has researchers, shall we say, stumped.
Yes, Vice tells us that a study found that the average length of an erect penis has increased by 24% in the past 80 years. The Stanford report says, quote, "If we're seeing this fast of a change, it means that something powerful is happening to our bodies." Now, researchers were actually expecting the exact opposite because sperm count and testosterone levels are actually decreasing, and they're there's an early onset of puberty. But this sort of funny finding, Huffington Post tells us, it is kind of a little bit potentially dark. For even if researchers don't know what's causing this increase in penis length, lifestyle changes and pollution could be to blame.
Could be. And Solange did not want to end the press review on our reproductive systems potentially going haywire because of chemicals, did you?
No, especially thanks to this story, we've had a lot of fun in the newsroom, a lot of giggles about how the press illustrates penises now with images of eggplants, as we see here. All of this because of emojis, of course, and this led me down to sort of an eggplant rabbit hole. I'll explain. Tasting Table, the food site, tells us that eggplants actually have an amino acid in them that create adrenaline and therefore can disturb our sleep, and that we should not have them for dinner but rather for breakfast. And then I found another story along these lines of eggplants about the world's largest digital photograph, digital picture. You can guess what it is of. BuzzFeed explains that this extra large picture of a penis was made by an anonymous artist who wants to be known as Eggplant. But the picture itself actually is not of an eggplant. It's here, or part of it is here, rather. The Guinness Book of World Records rejected this image. If printed out, it would be longer and higher than the Egyptian pyramids. They rejected it because, according to the Guinness World Book of Records, the pixels were too repetitive, a rejection that also led many people online to say, does the world really need such a big picture?
I'm just making a comment, and we've run out of time. So there you go. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you very much, Solange. Solange with the ever-important press review on France 24. Moody's coming up for you in a couple of seconds' time. Take it away.